Chapter 35, in which a learned man discovers the superior wisdom of a 14-year-old boy and a manuscript meets its just end. His own words were strangers to him. Crispin stared at the screen, wincing at the passage about Cameron's photography. Technology that could capture reality with absolute precision. Good Lord, had he really written that? What an insufferable, pompous arse he'd been. Outside, James and Oliver chased a muddy football across the winter-damp lawn, their laughter rising in gusts that seemed to reach his study window and retreat again. In the armchair by the fireplace, Margaret turned a page of her book, the soft rustle a counterpoint to the boy's distant shouts. He selected the entire Letitia Cameron folder and dragged it to the trash icon. The digital crunch was quiet, but definitive.
"Oh, Chris, was that the sound of literary euthanasia I heard?"
Margaret asked without looking up from her book. The cover featured an antique clock face splashed with crimson. "It was the kindest thing to do," Crispin replied, surprised by the feeling of lightness, of relief that followed. Cameron deserved better than that academic mausoleum I was building for her. Margaret glanced up, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Enjoying Lucy White's latest, then?" he asked, nodding at the book in her hands.
"She's quite clever,"
Margaret said, tapping the cover.
"Her characters are charming."
She flipped to the title page where Lucy's bold handwriting read,
To Margaret, it was a pleasure to meet Crispin. I hope you enjoy the latest mystery. Best, Lucy White.
A generous act, Crispin thought, feeling a quiet gratitude for the diplomatic bridge she'd so effortlessly built.
"What are you working on now?"
Margaret asked, her gaze drifting to his screen where a new document glowed. Crispin turned back to the laptop. The title page read, The Light of Van Diemen's Land. "It's about one of Cameron's rumoured lovers," he said, the words coming more easily than they once had. "A man who met her briefly, but circumstances forced him to emigrate to Tasmania. He lived the remainder of his life with only her portrait to remember her by."
"Fiction, then?"
Margaret's eyebrow arched.
"Goodness, a novel with actual feelings in it. Should I be concerned, darling?"
He met her gaze, finding not suspicion but a teasing warmth he'd almost forgotten how to recognise. Perhaps the man who left for Australia in December might have been.
"And the man who came back?"
He finds himself rather fond of emotions, actually. Terribly inconvenient, but there you have it. Margaret smiled, a small, private expression.
"I rather like him,"
she said quietly.
"He laughs more."
The door burst open with the force only a 14-year-old boy can generate. Oliver stood breathless in the doorway, mud streaking his trousers, his cheeks flushed with cold and indignation.
"Dad, we need a goalie. James keeps moving the jumper that's meant to be the post."
Last year, Crispin would have felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the minor irritation of a serious man interrupted at serious work. He would have glanced at his watch, calculated minutes, promised later with the weight of postponement. Now, he closed the laptop without a second thought. The academic reflex to prioritize the work, to analyze the emotion rather than feel it, was still there, but so was the memory of a voice asking if his ghosts would be disappointed in him for not living with passion. "Is he now?" Crispin stood, his smile breaking free without thought or hesitation. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Proper goalposts are essential to the integrity of the game."
"Quite right,"
said Margaret, her expression caught between amusement and something deeper as she watched him.
"Football requires standards."
As Crispin reached for his cardigan, his gaze fell on the small framed photograph he'd placed on the bookshelf a month ago. A fine art print that captured a lone ghost gum against a vast Australian sky. The composition, the light, the feeling of it was pure Carrie Watson. The familiar ache presented itself, a fact he could no longer annotate or ignore, no less painful for being expected. He'd carried it home across oceans, this quiet hollowness with Carrie's shape. But wound through the pain, like thread through cloth, was gratitude. She had been the ruthless editor of his own life, striking out the inauthentic passages so he could finally write a true one. He looked from the photograph to his son. Some losses, he realized, were exchanges. This pain was the price of this joy.
Coming, Dad.
Oliver bounced on his toes at the doorway, impatient for justice to be served on the football pitch. Crispin turned from the photograph, his mouth forming a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of both the gift and the loss. "Right behind you," he said, and followed his son out into the fading winter light. His laughter joined his boys in the garden, a sound that would have seemed foreign to the man who had boarded the Queen Elizabeth. But to the man who had disembarked, the man who had finally learned to see the spaces between the facts, it felt like coming home.